Hi, and happy graduation. I'm recording this message on the occasion of the 2013 commencement at Lawrence University, and especially for my theory students, especially those of you who were in the double degree program who would have come in the fall of '08. We had 5 quarters together. The first of those quarters in the fall, you were there for to hear about and see the immediate aftermath of the birth of my first child. The last of those quarters, I had to tell you that I'd been denied tenure. You were the last group that I took all the way through the 5 quarters because of the way my teaching assignment worked out my final year. For those of you who are in the 4-year program, I apologize that I've missed last year. I was thinking about you, but things were kind of intense, and I wasn't able to do anything. But I did want to mark this occasion, and I hope that this can be for all of you as well as for other students from other years. And what I thought would be the most appropriate thing to do would be to give a final Wellness Wednesday. So Wellness Wednesday Graduation Edition 2013. What I want to, my starting point is what I talked about when I first came back to class after the birth of my daughter, and which I returned to on our last Wellness Wednesday at the end of winter quarter the next year. And I talked about how the birth of Yuki clarified some things, brought them into new kind of focus in terms of a lot of the things I'd already been doing with Wellness Wednesday, and that my hope for all of you was and is that you would be able to see yourselves as a parent sees a newborn child, that that child needs to achieve, do, accomplish nothing in order to be fully loved. But that this doesn't lead to then just kind of doing nothing or languishing and being a blob, but that all of the efforts you put into doing something is not because you have something to prove, you need to become worthy of love and appreciation, but rather because there are all these wonderful things already inside of you, and how wonderful it is to bring those things out and to see them developed and to see them be used for the good of others. So not that there's something lacking that somehow needs to be crammed in through hours and hours of hard work, but rather that what's inside needs to be brought out. And that's still my hope for you, and what I want to talk today about is just a few challenges to that I think have become quite pervasive these days. So first of all, there's the message, which was even put baldly in one of Lawrence's own advertisements, the message, do it all. You don't have to make choices, you can do everything, you can have everything. And that's just not true. That's not true. You have to make choices. You can, and part of what Wellness Wednesday was all about and the Healthy Balance Statement was all about was saying, make thoughtful choices, make real choices, because if you don't make choices yourself, choices will happen to you by accident, by injury, by random happenstance. Choices will happen, limitations will happen. Choose which ones you want, choose which ones are in accord with your goals. So, this has been recently, this message has recently become even more prominent and more controversial through the publication of an essay. I think the title is You Can't Have It All. It's a woman who had a very high-profile career, I think maybe in the State Department, something like this, and she talks about the tensions that she found between professional life and parenthood. And surely those tensions are particularly acute in a case like hers, and I think women do face particular challenges often with that. But that's really something that all of us face in one way or another. This isn't just a woman's issue. Can you have it all or not? If you look at me, in a lot of ways, I've got the perfect set of circumstances. I've got a wife who, by choice and by joy and calling, is a stay-at-home mom. You'd think, oh, perfect circumstances, he can be a dad, he can pursue his career, easy street. And compared to a lot of people, it is. But I still have to make choices. I have a wife who's a stay-at-home mom and who also needs a fair amount of sleep. I really want to be actively present in my children's lives. And That means making choices. There are lots of things that I could do to advance myself professionally that I simply choose not to do and hope and trust things are going to work out. If you looked at the total numbers of hours that I put in week by week, well, it'd be a lot more than a European factory worker, but if you showed those hours to a lot of other professors, they'd probably laugh and say, oh, this looks like a vacation. What, are you working? But that's what I do. Does this mean that life is kind of easy street? Oh, lots of time with the kids, and we must have lots of leisure. Well, no. I do spend a lot of time with my kids. I have enough time one-on-one with my wife to talk through the things that are important for us to really stay close together. But it's 2 years since I moved to Pittsburgh. We've sat down, we've gone out to dinner without the kids twice. We've sat down and watched a movie together once. I have to make choices, even in what seems like a relatively easy, relatively conducive situation for that kind of balance. I have to make choices. I can't do it all. Neither can you make choices. Now, the second thing is that although you don't hear the opposite of the message, do it all, a lot of people are living the opposite of the message, do it all. And they're pouring themselves with a single-minded focus into one thing, and often that's their career. Often that's the pursuit of something career-oriented, whether it be status, power, money, prestige, whatever it may be. There are a lot of people who are single-mindedly pursuing those things to the exclusion of health, to the exclusion of relationships. Unfortunately, we see in the headlines every day to the exclusion of ethics, to the exclusion of things that are good for the running and organization of our society. What does this have to do with you? Well, if this is happening in every area of our life, of our culture, that people are choosing to live their lives in this way, that affects all the rest of us. If one or two people do it, fine, whatever, they're just doing their thing. If lots of people are doing it, that affects the cultural climate. And every time somebody looks at me, every time somebody looks at you, they're judging us implicitly against cultural norms, against what's just standard. And if that standard is changing, and it's changed across my lifetime noticeably, you're probably young enough you may not have noticed the changes across your lifetime, but they've been there. It's changing what those standards are. And that means that it's more difficult to live the kind of balanced, healthy life that I've been advocating through Wellness Wednesday, that I believe in. This is more challenging. It's going to be more challenging across your total lifetime than across mine. That's certainly the trend that we're seeing now. Now, does that mean it's impossible to live this kind of life with healthy, balanced choices and a good fit, a good harmonious relationship of the various parts of your life? No, that doesn't mean it's impossible, but that means it's harder. You're going to have to be very thoughtful about it. You're going to have to look at yourself very carefully and look at the situations you see around in the world very carefully and be very strategic, very careful evaluations, very careful choices. Now, I think you're well equipped to do that, because whether you were single degree or double degree, and I guess at least those of you in this particular group who are graduating at this particular time were double degree, but regardless of which of those groups you fall into, Lawrence has tried to equip you with the traditional liberal arts education. And I believe that that's one of the best tools for addressing this kind of life challenge. That if you don't just know about one thing, one discipline, if you've seen this panoply of possibilities, of paradigms, of approaches, that you're better able to synthesize, choose, create a new way of looking at the unique problems that you will encounter, the unique challenges that you will encounter in your life. Now, as a consequence of you have to make choices, you can't have it all, you're not going to be able to be completely successful in every area, sort of the flip side of this, which is a tremendously important thing to understand from an internal perspective especially, the flip side of this is that you are going to fail. You must acknowledge that and internalize that. If you're not okay with that, your emotional response to potential and real failure will drive your life in directions that you probably don't actually want to go in. So what do I mean by this? You're going to fail. Well, that you have abilities in so many areas. You can't fulfill your maximum potential in all of those abilities. That's part of it. Furthermore, as we talked about in Wellness Wednesday, kind of generalizing again from the case of women, if you're a woman, no matter what life choices you make, there's somebody out there who thinks that you're making bad choices about your life. That's just a reality that women face because of the cultural terrain we're in. And I think it's a very unfortunate and a very stressful one. Because at some level, unless you really work through this stuff, that's got to grate on you, knowing that some people think you're making bad choices. Well, if women face this particularly acutely, everybody faces it to some extent. There are so many value systems out there. There are so many people thinking, oh, that person isn't quite making the grade. That person isn't not quite all they could be, or not quite what would be most honored. And let me just make very explicit, when I say failure, I'm talking about what we register emotionally as failure. And a lot of you are ambitious overachievers, and that means that B+ level, B level registers to you like failure. I know that very well, and I hope that you've already in your time in college worked through that to an extent. It's a long process. It's something that I've had to work through over a long process to get to the point where the real, actual negative judgments of others, and especially the projected negative judgments of others, our imagination, oh, other people are thinking such and such, but what does that really reflect? That really reflects what I'm thinking about myself. So even if it's not what I think I believe, even if it's not what I want to believe, even if it's not what I'd explicitly espouse, when that emotional wrench hits of, oh, I feel like a failure in X person's eyes, that's a sign that there's something internal to ourselves which embraces that value system, which isn't necessarily ours. Now, what do you do about this? Well, during that same year that you were sophomores, in which I was denied tenure at Lawrence, Sarah and I were leading a group for seniors in the Lawrence Christian Fellowship, helping them to kind of transition toward this leap off into what comes after college. And one of the things that we talked about a lot, was the phrase, success equals faithfulness. So let me unpack this a little bit. The image that I find most helpful for this is that of a bridge tournament. Now, if you know how a bridge tournament works, you've got all these people at different tables. Each table has 4 people, one pair versus another pair. Now, on the surface of things, it may seem that these pairs are playing against the people who are at their table, and at a certain level, that's accurate. But here's the thing. In a bridge tournament, somebody randomly sorted out a deck of cards and then exactly duplicated that sort for every deck of cards at every one of those tables. So really, who you're playing against in a bridge tournament is only, in the most immediate sense, the people at your table. Really, you're playing against all of the other people at other tables who have been dealt exactly the cards that you've been dealt. So this is a beautiful illustration because of how different it is from real life. It's fair to compare 2 people at 2 different tables who've been dealt the same cards. And of course, in life, none of us are ever dealt the same cards. For a religious perspective, and this was originally where we were talking about, there's another layer beyond that even, which is that you can't simply evaluate yourself in terms of general success based on general abilities. You have to measure your success relative to your calling. So if you're called to be a novelist, and instead you decide to become an investment banker, you can be as successful in the general ways of measuring this as you want to be as an investment banker. But if you're supposed to be a novelist, you've actually failed. Okay, now, for some of you, that's a directly helpful thing to say because you share some of those religious perspectives. For the rest of you, there's a little bit of translation that's needed, but it's really not so much because this concept of calling, in general, that doesn't just arrive on a stone tablet that you wake up one morning and there it is, here's your calling. You have to work through a discovery of what you understand your calling to be. And although there is, for a religious person, a purely kind of spiritual dimension to that, there's a solid amount of that, 60, 70%, if it's meaningful to talk in those terms, which is exactly the same as somebody working through their own sense of vocation in the context of just their own thought, or working with a career counselor, working with a life coach, whatever it may be. So success equals faithfulness comes down to you cannot measure yourself meaningfully against all these various standards that are out there, which are very much active, and people are very actively measuring you by those standards. You can't use those. You have to figure out, what do you want your life to look like? And then that's the standard. That's the only meaningful standard for measuring your life. Now, so far, if that's what we're going to say, that sounds like a pretty popular kind of graduation time message going all the way back, at least, say, to Rousseau, who is big into that kind of thing. Decide for yourself what you want in your life. Really own it as yours and live accordingly. And what I want to add to that is just the sense of some of the challenges involved and how that really is a workable, fruitful approach to life, even through very difficult circumstances. And part of the reason that I want to say this particularly to you is that you saw that. You saw a lot of that. So when I was denied tenure, one of the things that I was determined to do was to walk through it with dignity and not to kind of slink away in shame, not to hurl abuse at everybody who supposedly had been unjust, but to tell you I was devastated by that in many ways, and yet many things in my world remained perfectly stable. I was able to tell you that it was a fair decision, it was a reasonable decision by the procedures, not one that I agreed with personally, but not something worthy of being protested. And in fact, I specifically timed when I told you to head off any kind of noisy protests which might have otherwise occurred. Life went on, a lot of life went on as normal. We felt that that was the right time for Yuki to have a sibling. That seemed like the right spacing. So despite the utter uncertainty of my professional situation, right around the end of that spring semester, spring term, we conceived the child who is Mari, born in March before I left. That summer might have seemed like the time to say, okay, forget about all this wellness and balance stuff. You need to get some stuff done. You are in a jam. You need to get yourself out of it. And I worked very hard that summer. But Sarah also had hard morning sickness, and I had the opportunity to take Yuki to these incredibly cheap swim classes that the town offered. So I forget if it was 8 or 10 weeks out of the summer. Every weekday, I got on my bike with Yuki in the bike seat, and we went off, and we had swim lessons together. And that is one of the great memories that I have, one of the great experiences. And I seized that. I did not say this decision, this set of circumstances dictates the way I'm going to live my life. No, I'm going to live my life according to my principles. And let me tell you, that wasn't blind. That wasn't, no, I close my eyes, I close my ears, no matter what happens, I'm just going to keep going like a freight train. Believe me, there were a lot of long conversations with Sarah, a lot of soul searching of myself. Did I make a mistake someplace? Have I misunderstood something? Am I really on the right path? Going over and over and over. I wanted to honestly make sure this is the right path. And as far as I could tell, it was. And one of the things I'm grateful for, many people have to go through that kind of thing, waiting a very long time for the kind of exterior confirmation that you're not crazy, that this is a reasonable thing to do. And mine came relatively quickly. As I was hired that next year, of all places, here at Carnegie Mellon University, hardly where you expect to end up after being denied tenure for lack of publication at a liberal arts college. And as of the end of this year, being able to say that those publications, which had so many strange things happen on the path toward hopeful publication at that time, so many of those things have been accepted, are coming out, so that there's a sense of solidity of, I don't know what my future is here, given the standards here, but at the very least, I can be very confident that I have now met the standards that existed at Lawrence. And that any doubt about that, at least, is firmly set to rest. So what I want to leave you with most of all is a sense that this way of living is doable and it's worth it. When I look at myself, I do not see a superachiever. I don't see anything exceptional in any area of my life. I don't see fantastic successes at any one of the things that I'm doing. What I see is an overall pattern that's coherent. I see that I'm having a deeply satisfying life that's mine, that I own, that I feel good about, in which the various parts all relate to each other harmoniously. One of my students at the end of this academic year here, gave a graduation talk in which she quoted a line from a poem that talked about success and failure both being imposters. And I know exactly what she means. I know exactly what the poem means. I'm grateful for these robes. I enjoy wearing them, but they don't define me. The failure that I experienced didn't define me. The greater success that I'm finding now doesn't define me. I've been the same person, the same husband and father, the same teacher, the same scholar. Fortunes come and go. There's something more stable about personhood that lasts through all of that, aside from anything else that may be seen on top of that. So here I am, 43 years old, in the middle of life, and I can say that I'm deeply satisfied with my life. You can have this too. You can say that 20 years down the road. You have to be thoughtful, but you don't have to be a genius. You have to work hard at it, but you don't have to be Hercules. This is doable, it's achievable. Don't miss out. Don't skip out on being able to say that about your life, that you have deeply integrated a set of principles, that you are living a life that you are satisfied with, that the various parts of it all integrate and relate harmoniously. I mean, what would you trade for that? What would you say, oh, I could have had that life, but instead I chose, and it was worth it. How would you fill in that blank? Don't miss out on this. Don't miss out on this. Seize hold of this. Let there be frequent times in your life when you come back to the place of big picture reflection that you're so often in graduation, when you reach these milestones. Come back to this place and think about what your life should be. Assess your life. Think about your life circumstances. Because you can have this kind of life, and it is absolutely worth it. So as you go out, as you graduate on Sunday, I will be thinking about you. I will be so happy for you. I wish I could be with you there in person. But know that I love you. I'm so grateful to have been your teacher. I'm so grateful for all of your support in a very, very challenging time of my life. I just leave you with the words of Jerry Maguire's mentor, the late, great, whatever his name was. I love my life. I love my family. I wish you my kind of success.